When you set boundaries with a narcissist, one thing is certain: they won't just walk away, they'll test them. Not once, not twice, but again and again. They'll knock on your emotional door with apologies, fake tears, and promises they never planned to keep. And when kindness doesn't work, they'll weaponize guilt, shame, and even threats. That's when your strength is tested the most. You've already done the hardest part, saying no to someone who once made you forget your worth. But you know what's even harder? Holding that no steady when they come back with every trick they know. In today's video, I'm going to give you 8 powerful, practical, and proven strategies to help you protect your boundaries when the narcissist tries to break them down. These aren't just tips, they're psychological armor. This isn't just about defense, it's about reclaiming your power and refusing to be manipulated ever again. If you've ever felt guilty for saying no, or scared to stand your ground, this video is for you, because boundaries aren't selfish. They're your declaration to the world: I am worthy of respect. So hit that subscribe button, turn on the notification bell, and stick with me until the end, because today, you're not just learning how to protect yourself, you're learning how to reclaim emotional freedom for good. Strategy 1. Stop explaining yourself. One of the most subtle yet dangerous traps a narcissist uses to tear down your boundaries is making you feel like you owe them an explanation. It rarely starts with shouting or obvious coercion. It begins with questions that sound reasonable, even caring. Why are you being distant? I didn't do anything wrong, did I? Can't you just explain what's going on so I can understand? It sounds like they want clarity, like they're trying to reconnect, but the truth is, they're not asking to understand, they're asking to gain access. Every time you begin to explain, you're handing them a map to your vulnerabilities, and they'll use that map to manipulate you again and again. Explaining doesn't earn their respect. It confirms that you still crave their validation, that you still feel like you need to justify yourself in order to hold your ground. And here's the hard truth: manipulators aren't interested in the truth. They're interested in how the truth can be twisted to serve them. Your reasons will be used against you. I need time to myself will become, you're being dramatic. I don't feel emotionally safe will turn into, you're too sensitive. And slowly you'll start to question your own reality. That's how they get their power back, by making you feel guilty for protecting yourself. But the reality is this: you owe no one an explanation for why you need space, silence, or separation. Boundaries are declarations, not respected. You don't need to be understood to be respected. You don't need agreement to be valid. Emotionally mature people respect space, even when they don't fully get it. Emotionally manipulative people will always try to make you feel bad for having needs. When you stop explaining, you're not being cold or disrespectful. You're making it clear that you've outgrown the need for permission to be yourself. When you stop handing over emotional data, when you don't give them reasons to argue with, they start to lose grip. They don't know what to push back against, because you're no longer playing the game. And in that silence, you're saying something louder than any words ever could: I'm no longer under your emotional control. You're not their puppet. You're not the person who wavers at a raised eyebrow, a soft voice, or a seemingly honest question. The first strategy to holding your boundaries is this: not to fight, not to defend, but to stay calm and firm in silence. Your stillness is not avoidance. It's the voice of someone who knows their worth and doesn't need anyone's approval to feel safe. When you stop explaining, you take your power back, and that is the first step toward true freedom. Strategy 2. Recognize subtle manipulation and don't react on emotion. Narcissists rarely attack you head-on. Instead of doing something blatantly wrong, they use quieter, more insidious tactics. Fake compliments, feigned concern, guilt-tripping comments, or vague phrasing that makes you doubt yourself. They'll say, "You don't trust me? after they've already betrayed you. They'll hand you a small gift and expect total obedience in return. They'll suddenly bring up a beautiful memory, not to reconnect, but to reel you back into the cycle. This isn't love, it's manipulation. Here's the problem. If you don't recognize it as manipulation, you'll keep reacting as if it's real emotion. And those instinctive reactions, your anger, your longing to be understood, your hope to feel seen, become the very fuel they need to keep you under control. But once you see it for what it is, everything changes. You stop playing into the act. You stop responding emotionally. You no longer feel the need to always explain, always defend, always clarify. Not every move they make deserves a reaction. Not every statement needs a reply. And sometimes, silence, delivered with clarity and composure, is the strongest move you can make. The more you recognize their tactics, the more power you reclaim. And when you're no longer reacting out of habit, you're no longer under their emotional spell. At that point, you're not just holding your boundaries, you're taking back control of the entire game. In Strategy 3, hold your boundaries without threats or drama. Holding boundaries doesn't mean you have to yell, issue ultimatums, or turn every moment into a confrontation. In fact, one of the clearest signs that someone has been conditioned by narcissistic abuse is that they believe they must become aggressive to be taken seriously. They believe that if they don't raise their voice, if they don't warn or threaten, their boundaries will be ignored again. And that's exactly what the narcissist wants. They want you to erupt, to lose control, to become reactive, because the moment you do, you've just handed them proof that they still control your emotional state. But real power doesn't come from volume, it comes from unwavering calm. The kind of calm that says, I don't need your agreement to know this is right for me. When you set a boundary without anger, without emotional theatrics, but with clear conviction, you communicate something far more powerful than threats ever could. You're saying, I respect myself. That's why this line is here. Whether you respect it or not is your choice, but I won't move it. Narcissists aren't afraid of confrontation. They're used to it. In fact, they often use it to flip the narrative and paint you as unstable or difficult. What terrifies them is your neutrality, your refusal to engage the way they expect. When you calmly say, I'm not okay with this, and then remove yourself without further debate or justification, you leave them speechless. You've taken away the script, unplugged the spotlight, and exited the stage of their emotional drama. Even more importantly, you do all of this without becoming a version of yourself you don't recognize. You don't have to become cold or manipulative to hold your ground. You can be firm and dignified. You can be kind and clear. You can still be you, just not the version of you who lets people walk all over your needs to keep the peace. Because that's the truth. Boundaries aren't punishments. They're not about controlling others. They're about protecting your own energy, your values, your peace. When you calmly state your limits, follow through without negotiation, and don't waver when challenged, you're not just setting boundaries, you're teaching people who you are. You're teaching them what is and isn't acceptable in your presence. And you're teaching yourself that you can be strong without losing your center. People might disagree with you, they might push back, but they will have no choice but to take you seriously, because your consistency speaks louder than any outburst ever could. That's when the dynamic shifts. That's when you stop being the one reacting and start being the one directing your own experience. That's when the narcissist no longer knows how to reach you, and that is a boundary they cannot cross. Strategy 4. Don't feel sorry for the wrong person. One of the most dangerous strategies a narcissist uses to dismantle your boundaries isn't rage, it's pity. They don't always yell or threaten. Sometimes they bleed vulnerability. They tell stories of childhood pain, abandonment, and emotional scars that only you seem to understand. They drop tears at just the right moment. They say things like, I don't know how I'll survive without you, and before you realize it, your empathy becomes the very chain that keeps you tied to them. Narcissists don't crave love, they crave control, and if they sense you're someone with a compassionate heart, they will drain that compassion dry. They don't want you to love them, they want you to assume responsibility for healing wounds they refuse to face. And when you finally draw a line, when you say enough, they flip the script and become the real victim, not because they're truly in pain, but because it's the only role left that keeps you engaged. But here's the truth you must embrace. Not every hurting person deserves to be rescued by you. Some wounds can't be healed with love, not because there's a lack of love, but because there's a refusal to take responsibility. Misplaced mercy isn't kindness, it's self-destruction. Don't sacrifice your emotional safety just to save someone who has no interest in saving themselves. Setting boundaries doesn't make you cold-hearted. On the contrary, it is the highest form of compassion for yourself because you no longer see pain as a reason to be punished in the name of love. You recognize that helping someone doesn't mean harming yourself in the process, and the people truly worthy of your love will never demand your suffering to prove it. When a narcissist plays the victim to make you bend, ask yourself, if I back down out of pity, who's going to protect me? That's the moment you realize you're done saving people at your own expense. That's the moment you reclaim your right to decide who's worthy of your kindness and who's been using it as a leash. Strategy 5. Be consistent with your words and actions. If you want a narcissist to respect your boundaries, you must respect them first, and that means your words must match your actions. Nothing signals opportunity to a narcissist more clearly than a boundary stated without consequences. They pay more attention than you think. When you say, I won't tolerate disrespect, but then stay after being disrespected, they're not listening to your words. They're watching your behavior, and your behavior tells them that disrespect is still allowed. Inconsistency is the biggest crack in any boundary. Every time you say, this is the last time, but then forgive again, you don't just lose credibility in their eyes. You start losing credibility in your own. You begin to doubt yourself. Am I really strong enough to follow through? And when you stop believing in your own boundaries, how can you expect anyone else to? The truth is, narcissists don't test boundaries out of curiosity. They do it to see if you truly take yourself seriously, and if they sense hesitation, they will push right into that gap. Not with yelling or threats, just with persistent pressure. They only need you to waver once to start pulling you back into the cycle. Being consistent doesn't mean being rigid. You can still be flexible, you can still be compassionate, but what you can't afford to compromise is the alignment between what you say and what you do. If you say that extended silence is unacceptable, then when it happens, you need to respond, not with rage, but with decisive action, stepping back, creating space, disengaging. If you say that lying is a deal breaker, then when the lie comes, you hold that line, even if it hurts, even if it costs you, because when you follow through on your word, you're not just protecting a boundary, you're rebuilding trust in your system. Narcissists exploit one major weakness in your system, when you go soft on your own standards, but when they see you calmly acting in accordance with your declared limits, without drama, without second-guessing, they realize the old games no longer work. Weak boundaries don't fail because the other person is too strong. They fail because the person setting them doesn't fully believe in their own authority. Give yourself something the narcissist never could. Consistency between your words and your actions. That's where your real power begins. Strategy 6. Don't react, reflect. When a narcissist provokes you, they're not looking for intelligent dialogue. They're not interested in logic, truth, or resolution. What they crave, what they absolutely need, is your emotional reaction. A furrowed brow, a tear, a raised voice, a defensive reply. All of it signals one thing. you're still under their control. And the stronger your reaction, the more satisfied they become, not because they've won an argument, but because they've pulled you back into the emotional game where they make the rules. But here's the secret: you don't have to react. You can reflect. To reflect doesn't mean to mimic their toxic behavior. It means you hold up a mirror. You show them who they are, and you stay grounded in who you are. When they attack with words, you don't fight back with the same venom. You calmly respond. I hear that you're angry. That doesn't mean I need to absorb that energy. When they blame, you don't rush to defend. You simply hold the truth without flinching. I understand that you're upset, but I won't take responsibility for things I didn't cause. This is how you shatter the old script. Without needing to raise your voice or prove your worth, you stop playing by their rules, and that alone shakes their foundation. Narcissists are masters at emotional manipulation because they know how to push buttons. But when the buttons no longer work, when their drama elicits no emotional chaos, they lose their grip. The less you react, the more clearly their true nature is exposed. They may become confused, escalate their behavior, or swing into victim mode, anything to re-engage you. But you don't have to take the bait. You stay steady. You keep your energy clean. You're not here to win a battle. You're here to stop playing their game altogether. Because that's what real power looks like: calm, centered, and unshakable. And in that quiet, when you choose not to react, but to reflect, something profound happens. Truth no longer needs to shout to be heard. And the narcissist, for perhaps the first time, has to face a reality they can't manipulate. Your peace is no longer negotiable. Strategy 7. Stop seeking validation from the one who hurt you. Nothing keeps a narcissist in power longer than your continued search for validation from the very person who broke you. Whether consciously or not, many survivors of narcissistic abuse still cling to a painful hope. If they just admitted what they did, if they just understood how much they hurt me, then I could finally heal. That hope is what keeps you stuck in the cycle. You wait for a genuine apology. You long for them to look at you with remorse. You believe that if you just explain better, write longer messages, or show more kindness, they'll finally recognize that you deserved better. But the truth is, they already know you're in pain. They just don't care. And every time you go back seeking acknowledgement, you're handing over your power to someone who's never earned it. The person who harmed you cannot be the one to heal you. They're not the judge of your worth. They don't have the authority to decide whether you were right or wrong, worthy or unworthy. And the longer you wait for their recognition, the longer you stay trapped in a courtroom where they are the judge, the jury, and the manipulator of the outcome. True healing begins the moment you stop needing them to validate your experience. When you reach the point where you can say, I don't need you to understand me for me to be free, you reclaim your own power. You no longer need their agreement to know you deserve respect. Narcissists don't offer validation. They ration it out as a reward for compliance. But you deserve more than crumbs of acknowledgement. You deserve to be seen, not through the lens of someone who distorts reality, but through the light you generate from within. Stop waiting for approval from a person who only knows how to manipulate. Offer that recognition to yourself, because once you validate your own worth, they can never take it from you again. Strategy 8. Separate emotion from reaction. A narcissist doesn't need to control your body, they only need to control your emotional reactions. If they can make you angry, confused, guilty, or afraid, then they're still steering your behavior without lifting a finger. They read your expressions like a map, and they know exactly where to press to make you explode or collapse. But here's what they didn't see coming. You can feel without reacting. You can feel rage rising and still choose not to scream. You can feel heartbreak and not fall to your knees. You can acknowledge fear and still walk forward with your head held high. Because emotions are signals. Reactions are choices. When you learn to separate emotion from reaction, you reclaim the power they thought they owned. You stop being the puppet whose strings are pulled by every jab, guilt trip, or subtle manipulation. You become the observer of your own inner world, and in that split second when you choose silence over shouting, composure over chaos, you're saying, "I'm in control now, not them." Healing doesn't mean you stop feeling. True healing is feeling everything, but refusing to be dragged backward by it. The narcissist may unleash every trick in their arsenal, false accusations, twisted narratives, fake vulnerability, but if you no longer react on autopilot, they lose the game. Because the game was never about truth, it was always about control. And breaking that pattern is not easy. It requires sitting with your pain instead of running from it. It means recognizing your triggers without obeying them. It means refusing to perform the emotional script they programmed into you long ago. But every time you respond with awareness instead of reacting with emotion, you rewrite your story. You become something the narcissist fears most: self-governed. And in that self-governance, you discover something they will never possess: true freedom. Maybe you once believed that setting boundaries was something harsh or rigid, a barbed wire fence, a cold warning. But in truth, boundaries are an act of self-respect. They are not built to push the world away, but to protect what's sacred inside you, the part that still believes in kindness, in love, and in your own worth. If you've experienced narcissistic abuse, you know what it feels like to be spiritually violated. They don't need to scream to hurt you, they only need to make you doubt yourself. They twist reality, make you believe that being hurt is your fault. They drain your emotions and come back for more. In that world, your boundaries feel like a luxury, until the moment you decide, "I deserve better." Every strategy you've practiced, staying consistent, not reacting, separating emotions from behavior, or refusing to seek their validation, is a brick you lay to rebuild your inner fortress. You're not weak for setting limits. On the contrary, you're doing something the narcissist will never understand: taking ownership of your own life. They may try to come back. They may test new tactics: charm, blame, playing the victim. But this time, you're different. Because you're not just enforcing a boundary, you've become the boundary. And that is the mark of real healing, when you no longer need anyone to validate your worth. When you walk away, not out of anger or revenge, but because you finally choose yourself. If you're somewhere in the middle of this journey, remember, no step is too small. Every no you speak, every moment of calm you maintain, every time you choose your own peace over their chaos, you're getting closer to true freedom. And if this video resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe, share it with someone who needs it, and drop a comment below, because this boundary work isn't just personal, it's part of a collective awakening. And you are not alone.